Hello, my name is Jan Pierce. Some of you know me. Some of you are already clients. Some of you haven't met me yet, and we're sending this to you ahead of time. So let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been an RN for just over 40 years. I was a practicing RN for 20 years, and then about in the late 1998 or so, I switched over primarily from nursing into Medicare insurances and long-term care planning, and then started this business with my husband, who passed away, and I continued the business on my own. So I've been doing this for 22 or 3 years now, working primarily with the insurances, and still keep my nursing license, which is really helpful for the types of things that we do here. And for example, when we talk about drug plans today, I understand a lot of the healthcare insurance issues from both a medical perspective as well as from the insurance perspective. I don't work for any one company. I typically will work with all of the companies that offer the types of products, either the Medicare insurances, the drug plans. I try to be licensed and certified with all of them so I can keep track of what kind of job they're doing. So if there's a plan I don't recommend, I'm free to say that as long as I'm an agent with that plan. So most of the time you're safe to ask me questions about any plans. I don't have an agenda. I don't have one company I'm trying to steer people towards. I genuinely want to help you find what's going to work out best for you. Today we're going to be talking about the prescription drug plans. I promised some clients that I would make a little video about that. So I'm trying to keep that promise to them. I find it's usually when clients come into my office, I do these illustrations on the whiteboard because I find it just makes things make a lot more sense when you can see it visually and see how things relate to each other. So that's the way I like to do it. So that's what I'll do here in this video. I am going to tell you up front, sadly, the prescription drug plans, also known as Part D, that's D as in dog. Medicare has 4 parts. Part A and Part B that are on the little red, white, and blue card that you get, and it also has a Part C and a Part D. And so today we're going to be talking about the drug plans. Whether you have just original Medicare, you can add a drug plan to that. If you have original Medicare with a supplemental insurance plan or a gap plan, you can add a drug plan to that. And if you have what they call an Advantage plan, then it will, most of the time, will come with a drug plan included with it. So maybe we'll get one thing out of the way right off the bat. Why have a drug plan? For some of you it's a no-brainer because you have a lot of expensive drugs, and so you want some help from an insurance plan. But some of you have very inexpensive generics, or you have no drugs at all. That's not uncommon when people come in here and they're turning 65, that they'll tell me, I don't take any prescriptions at this point. Why should I have a drug plan? The big picture answer to that is insurance really only works when people are paying into it even when they don't need it. Sort of like we're paying in for car insurance even if we don't ever crash our car, and we're paying for homeowners insurance even if our home doesn't ever catch on fire. But to be able to afford to take care of the catastrophic things that, or the more expensive things that we never know if they're going to happen or not, they kind of need everybody to be contributing, whether you're needing the help right then or not. So in order to convince people to jump on board when you turn 65 and become eligible to get a drug plan, then they will say you don't have to take one, nobody will force you to take one. But if someday you come in and say, I've all of a sudden developed primary pulmonary hypertension, and I'm going to be on super expensive drugs that are $6,000 a month, they're going to say, we're going to go back in time to when you first became eligible for Medicare, we're going to charge you a penalty, and we're going to, that will snowball over how many years that you went without a drug plan, and we're going to add that charge to the cost of the drug plan that you go out and purchase now, just kind of to get catch-up money from you for not having contributed. So for those 2 reasons, because you don't know what might happen and when you might all of a sudden need really expensive drugs, and because you're going to have this penalty that will snowball and get larger and last for the rest of your life or for as long as you need a drug plan, it's probably a good idea to get a drug plan when you first go on Medicare. And if you don't really need it, some of them are very inexpensive. And so you're not, $15, $12. There's even one this year that's $7. So it probably would behoove you to go ahead and jump into a drug plan anyway, even if you don't need it right now, to avoid those penalties. And the penalties are not that bad, but we don't know, for reasons that I can explain if you come in and talk with me, we don't really know what they'll be down the road, because we don't know what the cost of the drug plans will be down the road, and it's based on that. So anyway, probably that's one reason why you probably want to be looking at a drug plan. So having said that, let's talk about what Medicare did when they came up with this prescription drug plan. They've been in place for, I think, 12, 15 years now. First thing that you need to know, these are Medicare Part D drug plans, but Medicare does not offer them in the same way that Medicare doesn't offer supplemental plans or Advantage plans. Medicare helps design them, and in this case, it is very involved, sets these parameters, and then allows other independent private drug or insurance companies to offer the plans if they choose to do that. But they have to follow the basic outline and have certain criteria within their plan based on what Medicare designed. In some ways, there's a little flexibility. I'll show you that in a minute. But so Medicare designed the drug plan. You'll see from looking at the board here, I'm hoping you can see that well, that I have always thought that the easiest way to think about this drug plan is to think of it as a roller coaster ride. And so when you're up on the loops, you're paying more, and when you're down, you're paying less. And not everybody goes from beginning of the ride to the end of the ride. This is an annual thing that happens. Wherever you may be on the ride, when the December 31st comes around, you're going to get off and come back up. And in January of each year, you're going to be starting over again. January 1, you'll be starting up here again and starting to ride all over. Some people will only go a little ways on this, this roller coaster ride, and some people will go all the way to the end of this. Depends on how expensive your prescription drugs are. Okay, so not everybody will encounter the same hills and valleys of this plan. So Medicare has designed it. Individual drug companies offer these plans. And in the design, Medicare set up 4 stages of the plan. Stage 1 is called the deductible period. Stage 2 is called the initial coverage period. I call it the copay period. They call it the initial coverage period. Stage 3 is what they call the coverage gap. And stage 4 is called catastrophic. Didn't put that in there. Catastrophic coverage. So, if you end up in catastrophic coverage, that means that you have really expensive prescriptions, and this plan will help you a lot. Okay, if you're in the deductible period, most of us know with insurance plans, a deductible means that's what I'm out of pocket before my plan kicks in and starts helping me. I have a deductible on my car insurance, I have a crash, I have to pay the first $500 out of pocket before my company kicks in. So with the prescription drug plans, there is an upfront deductible. It goes up a little bit every year, and this year Medicare has set that amount at $445. Okay, so following the exact Medicare outline, you would be paying out of pocket the first $445 for your drugs each year. That's really important to remember, because many times my clients have come in and I find out they're not taking an expensive medication that they have. It can be a blood thinner, an important blood thinner. It can be insulin, because they forget that there's an upfront deductible, and they hear that their prescription is going to cost them $300 a month, and they just say, I can't afford that, I'm not going to take it. So it's important to know that there is an upfront deductible period. It's also important to know that not every plan is required to have that deductible. So some plans do not have it. Maybe I'm going to deviate for just a second off my script here and tell you that plans can choose not to make you pay that first $445, okay? And many plans make you pay it, many plans don't. If a plan down here has no deductible at all, the insurance company says you don't have to pay an upfront deductible. They are giving up, they're going to have to be paying from the very beginning for drugs that you would otherwise be paying for. So they're going to lose $445. Put yourself in their shoes. Why would you do that? Why would you tell the client? Medicare has set it up this way for you to have this money out of pocket, but we, being the very kind, generous, and magnanimous companies that we are not going to charge you that $445. Well, it's great marketing. It's easy to tell people, hey, come and take my plan. We have zero deductible for your drugs with this plan. And then what they do, and I can tell you based on my 12 or 15 years of working with these drug companies, they are going to up the premium and they are going to up your co-pays enough to make that back and then make more. Okay? They're going to make back the $445, and I have yet to see a time that they didn't get more money out of you in the long run. And it's typically about $300 more. So by choosing a plan that has the upfront deductible, you're actually going to save yourself money in the long run. And based on the way that I put everything in the computer and find out which drug plan is best for you, I see all those numbers. And so I can always go and look and see is there a drug plan that doesn't have a deductible where you would be paying out for the whole year, all costs included, the same amount. And 9 out of 10 times, the plans that have charged you that upfront deductible are going to be the cheapest plans for you overall. All things put together that have to do with the drug plan. So that's a little deviation there, but not all plans are going to have that drug plan deductible up front, but 9 out of 10 times you're going to be better off. And so most of the time when I'm looking for the best plan for my clients, we end up in a plan with an upfront deductible. If that's the case, do not forget that you have that upfront deductible. You might not have a brand name drug until the middle of the year, and all of a sudden in June you've forgotten that at the beginning of the year, because the deductible is not charged on all prescriptions. So you might all of a sudden get insulin in the middle of the year for the first time, and it's the first drug that you have that's going to be charging that upfront deductible, and you've forgotten that, and you walk in and you think you're going to pay $300 or $350 a month for your insulin for the rest of the year. So be very conscious of that upfront deductible. All right, back to the deductible period. You're going to have the upfront deductible. Once you've met that, then you're going to drop down into the copay period where you're going to pay less. Again, some people who just have maybe thyroid medication, maybe a water pill, maybe blood pressure medication, some very inexpensive simvastatin, lisinopril, levothyroxine, a couple of just very inexpensive generic drugs. They're going to be paying their $30 a month for their prescriptions for those, or they might not. On some plans you might pay $3 a prescription, it might be, but you will never even hit that upfront deductible. So you'll just go along the whole year paying the $3 or $4 that the prescription costs. But if you have more expensive drugs, at some point you're going to have met that deductible and you're going to drop down into, again, what they call the initial coverage period, because it's the first time that Medicare is actually going to, or your Medicare drug plan actually, is going to actually help you with the cost. Up here you're paying the full cost. So now you're down in the initial coverage period. So if I was on insulin and that insulin was going to cost me $300 per month, normally in this period, you're going to pay somewhere, they like to say, around 25%. Your co-pays are going to be somewhere around 25%. That's actually, I guess that might be a broad average, but typically, so half of 300 is 150, and half of that again is 75. So that would mean you'd be paying $75, but actually insulin is only costing between $30 and $45 a month when you're in this copay period. So it's not following the 25% rule. $45, that's not percent. So, so if I'm taking, and you know what I'm gonna do? Just to keep this all simple, I'm gonna pretend that insulin's gonna cost $50. The copay is gonna be $50. The drug actually costs $300, and that's what the plan says that the drug costs. And so they're gonna pay $250 of that $300 charge, and I'm gonna pay $50 of it. Every time I go in to pick it up, the plan is gonna contribute, that's the insurance part. They're gonna kick in the $250 each time. I'm gonna pay my $50 copay. If I have an inexpensive, let's say that I have, what's a good one? Well, let's just pretend that lisinopril might be a $20 drug. It's not that expensive, but let's just pretend. So I've got a $20 prescription, and so I'm going to pay $5 copay every time I get that drug, and the plan is going to pay $15. So for every drug, the plan is going to be paying something, and I'm going to be paying something. And there's a big computer up in the sky somewhere. Don't ask me where. I don't know how Medicare gathers all this data and where it goes to, but for every time you get drugs at whichever pharmacy that you're at, that you're buying them using your prescription drug plan, they're going to be tracking that, and they're going to be adding up this, how much you paid for a deductible, how much the plan is paying each month. They're going to keep adding those on, how much you're paying of these co-pays each and every month. And when you come to this next, if you make it where the total of those costs, the deductible costs, what the plan is paying, what you're paying, when that comes to, I believe it's $4,130 this year. $4,130, much of which has been paid by the plan. Okay? You might be out of pocket about $1,500 of that. But when all of the costs combined, you're going to have to just keep the general ideas here, because this will drive you crazy because it's very complicated. But the deductible, if there is one, everything the plan pays, every copay that you're paying, if that comes to $4,130, which means that you've got like between $300 and $400 a month worth of prescription costs, then you're going to go up again into what they call the coverage gap. Okay, that's stage 3. I try to keep my clients out of that, and there's a lot of ways to try to do that. So that's something to talk to me. There's lots of prescription assistance plans, there's coupons, there's a lot of different ways, sometimes switching identical medications, switching from Humalog to Novolog or Novolog to Humalog. They're identical insulins pretty much. But anyway, we try to stay out of that, but if you get to this break point here of where all of the costs combined are just over $4,000, then you go up into the gap. This used to affectionately be called the donut hole, okay? And we're lucky that that's not in place anymore, because that used to be 100%. When you hit that, I don't know why they called it something tasty like a donut, because it was more of a black pit from hell. But when you got to the donut hole, you used to have to pay 100% of the costs. Now the government has negotiated, forced, whatever. The drug plans have agreed to discount. And they gradually, year by year, have brought what those drugs plans, what those drug pharmaceutical companies can charge. They've had to discount it lower and lower till they've reached the final stopping point, where for any brand name drug now, you're going to pay 25% of the cost, and the drug company will have discounted it by 75%. So, because they say that all of these drugs, you were only paying 25%, or you were paying a 25% copay anyway, it will be the same price when you hit this coverage gap, but that's really not true. The copays are typically lower than that. And so, like with the insulin, you know, if it was $30 or $40 or $50 for your copay, now in the gap, you're actually going to pay 25%. And that would be, for that insulin, that would be $75. So it's not the full price, but it's not as cheap as it was here. So you see the roller coaster, you're paying the full price, you come down, you're paying copays. When you hit the gap, you go up a little bit, sometimes more than a little bit, but it just depends, but certainly not back up like it was in the old donut hole. And then there's one more break point. I think they said less than 15% of people, I think it was 15%, maybe not. But anyway, very few people actually hit this over here. This is, if you hit this next break point, this is where you go into the catastrophic coverage. So, when you hit this, it means that your out-of-pocket costs, what you have paid, okay? What does that mean about what the plan paid? That's dropped out of this equation. They pretend like that it doesn't matter for this break point here, okay? They call this the true out-of-pocket cost that's going to cause you to go into the catastrophic coverage, what I have paid out of pocket. And so if I've paid $6,550, but that's not true. What they say is true is not true, because they are including this 75% discount that you got, which is a significant amount, okay? So this looks really scary, but if you're into this phase, you've got brand name drugs that are expensive, and I guarantee you they've been discounted, so you will never be out of pocket that $6,000, or you shouldn't be out of pocket that $6,550, because it'll be more like you're out of pocket about $3,000, and the discount will add up to the other $3,000 or so. I am so sorry. I know that's complicated. Your eyes are probably glazed over, but I think, so let's just talk a minute about what happens if you get into the catastrophic then. If you've qualified, this discount on these brand name drugs, plus all of your costs, which would be all these co-pays, whatever co-pays you continue to pay in here, this 25% that you have to pay, this here is what you're paying in here, this 25%. All of that is counted. All of this is counted. And what was discounted is counted, and all of that adds up. And if it's $6,550, your costs go down to where you're only going to be charged 5% of the total cost of your drugs, which would be about $15 if we're talking about that insulin, okay? Or they also say generics can be would be about $3 per prescription, and brand name drugs would be about $9 per prescription, and whichever one is more. So for you with your insulin, the $15 for the brand name insulin is more than the $9. So anyway, it's complicated, all of that, but I think the most important thing to understand is, again, once you hit this break point, which will not mean that you're out of pocket $6,550, but you will be out of pocket about somewhere over $3,000 by this point. Then you get to drop down for however many months remain of the year until you get to December 31st of that year, and then you start off and go up and you start all over again, January. Okay. So you can, I hope that you can see just it's not like the type of drug plans that you probably had when you were on individual health insurance, or when you were on an employer plan, or with the military or whatever. You kind of met your deductible, and then you knew what your costs were going to be for the rest of the year. Nothing so simple here. Your costs, if you have very expensive drugs, they're going to change. And if you don't understand this broad picture, you're never going to remember all these breakpoints. You're never going to remember exactly what percentages am I going to be paying, all of that stuff. But just know that that's why your costs are changing. You go, oh my gosh, last time I came in, the first time I came in, it was costing me $350 for that, and then it was only costing me $45, and then it's costing me $75, and what the heck. But this, if you remember the roller coaster ride, and that each part of the roller coaster has a break point that's determined by how much you have spent in some combination with other things here, but what you've spent as a deductible then determines when you get to go down into the coverage period. What you've spent together with what the plan is paying, together with your deductible, determines when you go up again here, and then what the drug discount has paid, and what you've been paying in co-pays will determine if you go down here. Just know that that's how this is working. They designed this actually to provide motivation for some conscientious and use. They were trying to promote wise use of the plans. And so they put this gap in here so that people, if you had a lot of brand name drugs, they're going to force you, they're more expensive, they're going to force you into this gap, and those are going to be more expensive in the gap. And so they were hoping that you would think about, maybe I should change to generics if I don't really need to be on the brand name of my thyroid. I've been on Synthroid, maybe I can go on levothyroxine instead. They wanted this to be a motivation in a number of ways. What the plan is paying is important. You may not see what they're paying. You're paying your $50 copay, but because what the plan is charging you and how they're participating makes a difference, they wanted you to be conscientious about that and which plan you're choosing, but it's so complicated, how do you even process all of that? So I think they overcomplicated it, but I get why they did. I see what they were trying to do, but like everything else that the government seems to do, they made it really awfully complicated. The way that we get around that, now that you have a general idea of how the plans work and you don't have to memorize all of that stuff, it's not going to be important. What's going to be important is just remembering the roller coaster, okay? Remembering that that's how it works. So as ups and downs are happening to your costs, you have some idea as to why that's happening. But how do you choose a plan? Well, that's a whole complicated thing of itself, because every plan is going to charge you, the premiums are going to be very different from plan to plan. What's in their formulary will be different. How they even make drugs, what tier they put them in. Many times drug plans, you're old with your employer plans or whatever, also they have different tiers. The more expensive drugs are tier 1, or no, the cheaper ones are tier 1. The generic drugs are tier 1, the more expensive ones are tier 4 or 5. But they're not consistent from plan to plan. So if you said, well, I have insulin, it's a tier 3 with this plan charges this much for tier 3, another plan might call it a tier 4, another plan might call it a tier 2, and they have different prices. So there's no way to intuitively look at these plans, and if they do away with the deductible, then they're going to up other costs in there. It is a gobbledygook mess. The only saving grace of all of that is that there is software. Medicare has software. For anybody who wants to see exactly how to get in there and how to use that software, I'm happy to help you understand that. If you come in here, I put into the software the prescriptions that you're on, the dosage of those prescriptions, what pharmacies that you like to shop at, and then we punch a button and it will tell me which plan is going to save you the most money overall for the drugs that you take and for the pharmacies that you want to shop at. Now, then we play with it from there, because sometimes you're paying, it's not unusual for me to find you paying $20 a month copay in one of these prescription drug plans that you can use a GoodRx coupon and get for $5 a month. So, so we'll play with it a little bit more and try to get the costs down. But if we're just looking without doing some of those extra things, and there's prescription assistance programs that are right with the pharmaceutical companies. And the more expensive that your drug is, the more they will allow you to make and still help you. We're not talking about Medicaid.